Hi everybody, I'm John Fensel here in Gettysburg at the site of a field of battle that isn't often visited here but makes it no less important. We're right off of Coster Avenue and Stratton Street that you can see right over here to our west. But what I thought I'd do is just give you a quick summary of what transpired here, talk to you a little bit about some of the different dimensions of the battlefield. Really fascinating, but it deals with day one of the battle, specifically in the afternoon. And recall at this point that all the Union forces of the 1st Corps and the 11th Corps were all being driven back from town, and the 11th Corps was being driven back from the north, and they were under the attack of both Confederate generals Early and Doles. And at that point, Union Major General Carl Schurz had asked for some reinforcements to protect his right flank. And you can see over here, this is the 27th Pennsylvania Volunteer Monument, very old monument. And this is, it's great that this has been restored at least somewhat. But very interesting at this point, General Schurz had asked for reinforcements to protect his right flank, and Oliver Otis Howard said, look, I can't afford it, you're on your own. But then once he saw the severity of the situation, he said, okay, I'm going to give you a 1,200-man brigade that was under the command of Colonel Charles R. Coster. He came forward from Cemetery Hill over here to Stratton Street, which is over there by the stop sign. And they were, all these, by the way, were just fields at the time, and lots of fences. There was lots of livestock, and there was a brickyard over here to the south, I believe. So that's not there either. But wasn't a very strong defensive position at all. As you look over here from south to north, one of the things you're able to see is not an advantageous position because you're almost in a depression. As you can see, the ground swelling up in front of us, and then over here to the west you can see that ridgeline where that car is coming down with its lights on. So but this was the site that they chose and to fight. And there was a fence, I believe, where this fence was, and that fence at the time was a stout rail fence. But very, very heavy battle here, especially as Coster was just finishing up with his defenses. General Hayes's Louisiana Tigers came in. He hit him from his left flank, which is right over here to the west, and then you had also men from Avery's North Carolinians that were coming in from the north. The 154th and the 27th Pennsylvania, remember the monument that I just showed you over here, the 27th Pennsylvania, tried to pull back, but then they couldn't, and so they retreated back to Cemetery Hill. They really did all they could. There were significant casualties on both sides. I think that there were, I read someplace, there were 113 cannon rounds, most of them canister, which were all fired in a 30-minute time period. And so if you know about canister, you know that that's a very short range ammunition that just has devastating effects. It tears men apart, and so they really did all they could. Significant casualties on both sides. Confederates Hayes and Avery would go on to play a really significant role in the Day 2 fighting on East Cemetery Hill. Here is the marker for the 1st Brigade under the command of Charles R. Coster. Charles Coster, it's interesting, he's from New York City. He rose through the ranks, literally, from private all the way up to colonel, commanded the 134th New York, and then after Gettysburg, he resigns his commission. Colonel Avery on the Confederate side, the North Carolinians, he would die the next day in his brigade's attack on East Cemetery Hill at 34 years of age. What's really interesting about him, and he's the guy that's holding up the sword there, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong, but he writes, he's left on the battle. He's partially on the battlefield. He's partially paralyzed, and they find him. He can't speak, and so they give him a piece of paper, and he writes out on the paper to this major. He says, "Major, tell my father I died with my face to the enemy." Harry Hayes went on to survive the Civil War. He goes on to be the sheriff of Orleans Parish in New Orleans, and then it's funny, he is later removed by General Sheridan. But what's really interesting here is that this was a mural that was done, I think, in 1988 by Mark Dunkelman and another historian, but really fabulously done, all covered in plexiglass, so it's preserved. And you can see the line of the Confederates approaching from north to south, right over here where this house is, advancing toward the New Yorkers and the Pennsylvanias under the command of Colonel Coster. They're coming in from the west, and from the center then you have the Louisiana Tigers. Just a fierce fight. And also what's interesting about this is the 134th New York Monument, 154th New York Monument. It's memorializing their actions on July 1st, 1863. And it shows all their casualties that you can see. But what's pretty fascinating about this monument that you don't see in a lot of other monuments, they have all the casualties, killed, wounded, officers, missing officers and men, total 200 casualties. But then on this side you can see died while prisoners, 42 of them, which is fascinating because what that shows you is that, you know, even if you survived the war, if you were a POW, you might not survive. So 42 of their men who were captured were killed as well. And you can see the Excelsior. Anyway, I thought you'd like to know.